Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Grown Folks Business on Thursday evening. Hope everybody's well, staying warm. It was a nice day, a little breezy. They said 70, but I didn't feel that. We got a couple other nice days ahead, though, so we'll take advantage before the Hawk gets here and Jack Frost and all his friends. Just wanna say welcome. Um, I'll be somewhat upfront, and I just found out a person that I know from my PhD program passed away. So if I'm a little somber, that's what it's going to be dealing with, and that's where it comes from. But we will power through this evening, and we're going to deal with a tough topic tonight. I think it's a tough topic because it's about justice. Uh, I titled tonight's show "Normalizing Justice: America's Trials and Tribulations," because we're on the other side of um, Ahmaud Arbery's victorious conviction of three men who were responsible for his untimely death. And it was reminiscent of other times in this country's history where black men have been met with a level of violence that seems to be reserved just for them or us. So it's unfortunate that it took place, but we come out on this side of it witnessing something that has not been normalized when it comes to violence against a black male or the black community at the hands of white people, and that's justice. So far, that is exactly what we've seen since those men were convicted. I want to say hello to a newcomer to the space. We welcome him in, and I appreciate you joining us, Arthur. You can say a couple words about what it is you do, because I think it's kind of apropos for what the topic is tonight. So the floor is yours for a moment, man.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Arthur Durham, born and raised in Philadelphia. I've been here in Greensboro now for 5 years. Right now, I'm the director of admissions at a new public charter downtown called the Experiential School of Greensboro. I'm also a consultant here for the Cure Violence Gate City Guardians program, where I just help them to arrange certain specifics of the model. Cure Violence, for whoever doesn't know, is a program model that's designed to treat violence as an epidemic and try to isolate and get individuals at the highest risk of, participating in certain types of violences, particularly gun violence, by recruiting them out of the neighborhoods and giving them certain resources that they can get to hopefully have it spread throughout the community. So right now, I'm just working with them in terms of professionally developing them, showing them how to apply the model. I actually worked in the streets of New York City for 6 years, more prevalently in Central West Harlem, where we did a phenomenal job there. So we're just trying to hopefully help it spread here in Greensboro by expanding the territories in which the program is currently residing, which is up and down Martin Luther King Boulevard and centered right there at Smith Homes. That's pretty much our catchment area there.
Yeah, I appreciate the work you do. And I was mentioning before we came on air, I took a ride along Tuesday with a couple of Greensboro's finest. And yeah, that was a lot of the area we went around. I'm seeing places, and Arthur, I know you say you didn't grow up here. I did, man, born and raised. And I'm going through parts of town that I hadn't been through in that capacity. And, some of the back streets since I was a youngster. And, it's not a secret at this point. I'm running for City Council District 1, and primarily one of my motivations is not enough has changed, man. I mean, the same places that were hot back then are still hot to this day. And not saying that hot has to exist at all, but it definitely shouldn't be in the same old haunts. It needs to, something's got to change. So yeah, that's part of my motivation. But seeing some of those nooks and crannies of the city that I used to be in at a certain age, yeah, man, we got to do something about it. And I'm glad you are a part of what we should be doing, which is treating this thing a little differently than just black and white crime. It's not that simplistic. There's a lot of gray in the middle of this, and everybody also knows my whole concentration is focuses on economics. We gotta get money in places that it's not usually sustained in, and it's not usually it doesn't get to stay. It generally is made, exploited somehow, and it goes elsewhere to undergird tax bases that don't benefit the southeast side of town. So anyway, I appreciate that. As I stated, tonight's show is wrestling with the idea of justice. It's centralizing it in where we exist in this great country of America, right? And it's something that I think it just makes sense to discuss on the other side of the trial, where those three men were convicted of killing Ahmaud Arbery. So I want to start off the show with a couple of clips. They'll give us plenty to talk about. I actually, I make the mention when that happened to Ahmaud Arbery, when we saw the tapes, it was as close to what happened to Emmett Till in a more modern day sense. It was as close as I think we get to that. Some misunderstanding that's based in a realm of fantasy or fallacy leads to the brutal murder of a black young man, and in Emmett Till's case, a child, basically. So I wanted to go back to that. I wanted to reflect on how their families, how their mothers primarily dealt with experiencing the trauma of losing their child in that way, in such an egregious way. So I'm going to play a clip of Mammy Till, if I'm not mistaken, who was Emmett Till's mother. And I'm going to let her tell the story of what she experienced on the day that she was taken to her son's body. There are graphic images in this clip. It's no secret that she was adamant in 1955. She was adamant about the casket being left open so that the world could see what had been done to her son. So I'm going to play that clip, and then I'm going to go right into a clip of Ahmaud Arbery's mother responding to the conviction of the men who killed her son. So bear with me while I share screens, and on the other side, we'll talk a little bit about all of this.
Came back to the funeral home. About 3 blocks away, an odor met me that nearly knocked me out. I said, "What on earth in the world is that?" It was Emmett's body. That's how the smell was so strong until it covered a 2 or 3 block area. My father was on one side of me, and Rayfield Moody was on the other side of me, and Jean was at my back. And I shrugged them. I said, "Turn me loose. I've got a job to do, and I don't have time to be fainting now." I saw his tongue had been choked out, and it was lying down on his chin. I saw that this eye was out, and it was lying about midway the cheek. I looked at this eye, and it was gone. I looked at the bridge of his nose, and it looked like someone had taken a meat chopper and chopped it. And I looked at his teeth, because I took so much pride in his teeth. His teeth were the prettiest things I'd ever seen in my life, I thought. And I only saw 2. Who grabbed the rest of them? They'd just been knocked out. And I was looking at his ears, his ears were like mine. They curled. They're not attached, and they curled up. The same way mine are. And I didn't see the ear. Where's the ear? And that's when I discovered a hole about here, and I could see daylight on the other side. I said, now, was it necessary to shoot it? If that's a bullet hole, was that necessary? And I also discovered that they had taken an axe and they had gone straight down across his head, and the face and the back of the head were separate. Well, I looked at Mr. Rayner, and Mr. Rayner wanted to know, was I going to have the casket opened? I said, oh yes, we're going to open the casket. He said, well, Miss Bradley, do you want me to do something for the face? Want me to try to fix it up? I said, no, let the people see what I see. I said, I want the world to see this, because there's no way I could tell this story and give them the visual picture of what my son looked like.
The easiest thing would have been to say, no, close the casket, I can't bear it. But she somewhere found the strength to say, I'll bear my pain to save some other mother from having to go through this. And because she put the picture of this young man's body on the conscience of America, she might have saved thousands of young black men and young black women's lives. Introducing
mom, Wanda Cooper-Jones, and her attorney, Lee Merritt. Good morning to both of you. Ms. Cooper-Jones, I'd like to start with you. I know it's been an incredibly difficult time, a long, agonizing wait, almost 2 years for you. And now here we are, Thanksgiving morning. Can you put into words how you are feeling and what this verdict means for you and your family?
Today is Thanksgiving, and I'm really, really thankful. My family and I are very, very thankful for the verdict we got on yesterday.
Take us inside the courtroom. You were there every step of the way during this trial, listening to those horrifying details, watching those videos over and over again. And then yesterday, when the verdict is read, can you describe that moment for us?
When I heard the judge read the charges, and immediately after every charge, he said the first guilty, I said to myself, we finally got justice for Ahmaud. We finally got this. And I was very, very thankful, very excited. I mean, I was just really no words to explain all of the emotions that I was going through at that time.
As we noted earlier, there was just one black juror in this trial. You expressed concern about that before. Did the verdict surprise you in any way?
It didn't really surprise me with the verdict that we got, because I sat there every day. I heard the state present their evidence. I was very, very confident that they did a very, very good job of presenting their evidence. And I knew that if the jurors took their evidence, went back and deliberated over the evidence that was presented, that we would get justice for Ahmaud, and we did.
Lee Merritt, I'd like to bring you into this conversation. I know you've been a part of a number of painful cases in recent years, but because of this case, Georgia repealed the citizen's arrest law, passed its first hate crime law. Do you think this case has the power to inspire broader change across the country when it comes to criminal justice reform?
Absolutely, and I think the inspiration comes from Wanda Cooper-Jones. She laid out a blueprint for all of America from a people empowerment standpoint, that a single mom would fight in the determination to really inspire a nation and get us this outcome that rarely happens in the South.
Lee, how would you characterize the role race played in this case, both inside and outside the courtroom? And what, if anything, have we learned about the state of race relations in America during this process?
Well, we know that Ahmaud was targeted because he was a black runner in the community that thought that his presence there wasn't appropriate. And we saw during the case, the prosecution made a decision not to center on race, but center on the criminal nature. And what I appreciate about the prosecution's strategy was that they said Ahmaud Arbery was a citizen in the United States running on a free road. And that alone entitled him to life, not by virtue of any protected class that he belongs to, but we all enjoy these rights as citizens of the United States of America.
Ms. Cooper-Jones, if you could speak to the three men who were convicted in the murder of your son, what would you tell them this morning?
I would just simply tell them that their bad decisions has impacted two families, my family and again their family. Not only did the Michaels lose his son, they lost a grandfather, and they will be impacted about his grandchild. So I lost a son, but they lost three generations there.
Thank you so much to the both of you this morning for taking the time, Ms. Cooper-Jones. We are thinking about you and your family and wish you a happy Thanksgiving as well. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm back. Yeah, man, that's heavy stuff for me. Emmett Till was a name that I heard. It's one of those things you don't know when you heard it, and you just know what it was about, and it resonated and stuck with me my whole life. I could never forget his name, just based on hearing about what happened to him. This is, something that is worthy of celebration, that Ahmaud Arbery's killers got what they deserved. But when I think about this from a historical perspective, 70 years, and here we are dealing with something that probably, and I know Ms. Jones mentioned in different interviews, that probably wouldn't happen without the video. How unfortunate is that? And, the evidence in Emmett Till's case was paramount to a video or a definite identification, and it still didn't work out. But here we are 70 years later, predominantly 98% white jury, from what I understand, gets it right. That speaks to a positive trend, so to speak, in terms of where we may be headed. But 70 years later, and there's still the reaction of the overly zealous and violent reaction of people when they think they see a black person out of place or out of line with how they think they should be conducting themselves. And the consequences in the cases of these two men, one of them a 14-year-old child, was a brutal death. So I'll start with the simplest question, and please feel free to take it wherever you want to based on the videos that you just watched, because I know that it does something to me. So feel free to voice what you feel about what was shared in those two clips. But Meryl, I'll start with you. What does justice look like to you, man? What is justice? Simply.
Yeah, that's a I mean, I got two competing thoughts. I mean, I think the way you have to look at history is looking at it forward instead of backwards. And so I am pained by that, the Emmett Till story, and just the brutality of it. And then all the things that happened or didn't happen the way they should have. And then lament at how many cases that we don't know about that have happened. And you have to have that video for things to move forward. So it's hard for me to get that in my head, because people, tend to say, oh, things are happening more than they used to. And it's nah, it's just televised now. People know about it. So that's one thing. The second thing is I appreciate that justice was prevailed. And I feel like that's the only outcome that should have happened with Mr. Arbery. But it's interesting the strategy that the attorney used, because out of necessity in that county, in that place, to barely bring up race, because they were like, they knew like that was the way to win, and also not to get the public uproar. Governor Kemp came out publicly and appreciated the verdict and said justice prevailed. There were other conservatives that agreed. I haven't heard any prominent conservatives say anything contrary to that. So like that's helpful, but that strategy was deliberate to make sure that the focus was on this, Ahmaud Arbery as a human being, and that seemed to work and not get us into this, our side, your side type of deal. But at the end of the day, I mean, if we don't confront like the race played a major factor in this and in other cases, I'm not fully satisfied, right? Because the conversation is just it kind of got whitewashed. So yeah, that's what I'm dealing with now.
Yeah, the beautiful thing, from what I understand, Meryl, the race element will come into play with the federal charges as they come out. I'm fairly certain that the lawyers that handle this criminal trial were aware of that to some level, but I'm also certain that the racial aspect did not need to be unpacked, because the behaviors were so egregious and all of the evidence pointed towards this act being maliceful and criminal, regardless of who the victim may have been. So it was a win for the scales of justice, and historically speaking, you hit on a really great point. There's hundreds of other people that I could reference in the history, especially concerning Black American men, the egregious violence that was visited upon them, in ridiculous numbers for the most minimal offense.
And only a small percentage of these cases actually go to trial. Yeah. If you look at it, I mean, like these defendants are pressured into like doing some type of plea. So like it's just a victory to kind of get to the trial space. But again, without the video, you don't even get that problem.
Yeah, you got a good point in that. I mean, I don't even know if they go to trial if their victim had been a white person. They would probably plead it down and took whatever they could have got out of it. But in the normalcy or the lack of normalcy in terms of what generally happens in this case, these type of cases, hey, they probably felt comfortable rolling the dice, and they may be the most surprised out of anyone. Who knows? But yeah, Arthur, you get the way we do this now. What does justice mean to you? And feel free to touch on some pieces of the video.
Yeah, just to touch on the Emmett Till piece, my minor actually was Black History, coming out of Penn State University, and several of us, we actually went to Meridian County in 1993, and we took that walk through Money, Mississippi is probably about 2 blocks long, right? And if you ever go down there, that's the thing that they talk about, and you can actually take the trail of actually what happened. So I remember being a little boy writing a book report about that, looking at the Jet magazines and stuff and things of that nature. And we took that walk. We actually went down there. The shack where his uncle where he actually was abducted at, is still there. And as of 93 was more preserved, actually. The shed where they take you at, where they actually beat him, you wouldn't believe how small the shed actually is. The shed may be, I would say, it's high. It's probably about 11 feet high and maybe 4 by 7. The shed actually was still there. They did some renovations there, but they don't like to declare it a tourist attraction. Now you can go to the Tallahatchie River where they actually brought his body up and things like that. But it brought us all to tears to just witness that. And then they give you the last excerpt of the guys who killed him, whatever the guy's name was. The lady who actually said he whistled at us, she's still alive. her husband, RB, whatever his name is, they sold their story to a magazine because they couldn't get Double Jeopardy. And as an old boxer, like I boxed for a long time, one of the things that I used as a boxer, he said before Emmett Till died and right before they shot him, he said they asked that little boy who was brutalized and beat down like that, does he still think he's better than a white man? And he said, Emmett Till said yes. And he shot him. That's when they said he shot him. And I always used that as a tool whenever I thought I was beat or whenever I was facing adversity. I'm an individual who did 11 years in prison. And I always had to find something to do, something deep. And I always dug down and just had to think, being in that type of situation, being drug out your home, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's pitch dark there, getting, 1955 Mississippi, Meridian County. I mean, to this right now, you got me teary-eyed because I remember being intimately involved with that and taking that walk. But and to transcend to the Arbery case, Georgia, we right here in North Carolina. Some of my people are, still live down there. Unfortunately, we are still subjected to these type of things. They try to attack, remember when they first got him, they tried to attack his credibility, trying to mention some unfortunate situation he had in his life. So the dehumanization of us, even when we get brutally assassinated, right? That's something in 21st century, I believe. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll change because of the majority here and how they rule amongst us. But at the same time, I think we need to, as a people, start focusing on centering ourselves and making sure we do better as a people, and specifically individuals of note and of a higher acumen level, to have our portrayal accurate, hold our media personnel more accountable. And I always try to say this, and I mean it when I say it, we need to do better at establishing our narrative within the media channels, like the radio, the magazines, the newspapers, whatever way we can do it, because they do the great job of even planting doubt in our heads about the justification for their brutality. I've actually heard people, say things about the Arbery case. Oh, maybe he did that. Or why did he go and drink some water? Things like that. Our people. And I'll be like, so you took the bait. You didn't even look at the facts of the case and why this man was hunted and killed. You just looked at why did he walk in the place to get water. And that's we have to do a better job with that. But this is a great conversation, and the justice surrounded it. I was happy, but then in turn we had the Rittenhouse thing right after that. And if I was a betting man, I would have bet every dime I had that he was going to get off, and Vegas was holding some odds.
So yeah, Rittenhouse, and then we had Ahmaud Arbery, and it was a really court TV type situation. It was almost like when OJ was driving the Bronco in the early 90s. It was a week of litigation and various law tactics that we just powered through the last 2 weeks. Yeah, you said some good stuff, man, and I find it so fascinating that we don't necessarily seem to call it out in the way that we would like to have it called out. And I'm in total agreement, Arthur, in terms of our depictions in the media. I think we talked about this when we first met. I'm not certain, but that's my thesis topic, and it's going to be my dissertation, and it's all about portrayals of Black Americans in media. And you're absolutely right. There are people who are us that exploit us, and I'm not looking for halos or some perfect existence, but we can't just have depictions be one way and then wonder why people feel justified in their maltreatment of us, why someone would instantly, as you stated, question why he was there, what he was doing. When you hear the whole story, it's just a shame. It's an open house being built. Who hasn't stopped at a house that if they're walking somewhere, you look and see what the framework looks like and everything else? And the guy who owned the property even said no. I didn't think nothing was wrong. There was absolutely nothing that he was doing wrong in that area, in that space. But the outcome is still what the outcome is. Bob, share your thoughts. What does justice look like to you? And you can unpack some of the thoughts you have about the clips.
This is such a big issue for me on various levels. Emmett Till, I was 24 days old when Emmett Till died. That means that happened in my lifetime. I don't like to think of myself as that old. It feels like I should be ancient for that to have happened in my lifetime. So that's one thing. That's one point. The Aubrey situation, to me, is nothing different than a current time lynching. The 911 call. What's the emergency? A black man is running through the neighborhood. That's the emergency. A black man is running through the neighborhood. That was the verbalized emergency to justify the 911 call. Maybe not that, I may not repeat that exactly accurately, but that's the emergency. A black man is running through the neighborhood. Video. We have video here. We had video with George Floyd. Video is the game changer. We've not had video. We don't need video in white crime. Why do we have to have video in order to have any chance of this stuff being? And I can hear white people that I know well saying, "Oh, he must have done something. Oh, he must have done something." Because nothing bad would have happened had he not done something. Felton, you may not realize our friend Michael was in your video that you showed just a minute ago, the clip. He was on the courthouse steps in Brunswick the 3 days before Thanksgiving when the verdict was announced. He was there from early Monday morning through the announcement. And he's in that clip you shared. He talked about the community that was so present there. He talked about the power of that community and the uplifting nature of that community. He talked about justice being served by the verdict. That's not justice. That is not justice. Justice is for the man to still be living and jogging.
That's going into the next comment, so I'll stick with you when I get that one out, Bob. And you can wrap up your thoughts, but I'll incorporate what you just said because it definitely goes in. And I wanted to also say, the 911 operator asked repeatedly, what is he doing wrong? And there was no response. That's how ingrained and how easy it is to just think that somebody out of place moment, that other shows itself, and it doesn't have to be anything definitely that is doing wrong. He's here. That's what's wrong. So to your point that you just made lastly, I wanted to unpack this idea, and I'm going to get back around the space. But Bob, I'll start with you because you kind of touched on it. So just finish unpacking it. Does justice afford us protection? I say that because, as you just stated, at its core, that is what justice, in my mind, is supposed to encourage, levels of protection. Everybody on this call, everybody that knows me has heard me mention at some point, and Arthur, this might be new to you, but I'm sure it won't surprise you. When the federal troops, the Union troops, federal troops were removed from the South, the protections that had been afforded newly freed Black Americans over the last decade were gone. Those protections were a measure of justice, and it was a protection of their safety. And once those troops were removed, lynching took place on a grand scale. So, Bob, to further unpack your thought, does protection afford us justice? Because as you stated, justice means that Ahmaud Arbery is still jogging in somewhere.
The George Floyd verdict, the Arbery verdict, are examples of how the system can work. They are not examples of the system working. They are not indicative of anything, in my opinion, other than, okay, this particular case with this particular array of evidences in this particular jurisdiction with this particular array of prosecutors, jurors, et cetera, okay, it turned out right. It is completely inadequate to suggest that these cases foretell justice, protection, security, equity. Pick the words. There's nothing to suggest, in my opinion, that there is anything to rest on here except in terms of these specific cases.
I accept that, and I understand. Yeah, it's almost a perfect storm of circumstance, video, uh, public outcry. I don't think it was remotely worth it for those two cases to have different outcomes for anybody involved, no matter how much they may lean towards the despicable thoughts and behaviors that otherwise would allow for those things to go a different way. Good thoughts there, Bob. Appreciate it. Arthur, what are your thoughts on the idea of justice? Does justice afford us protection?
Uh, like you just spoke about, the ushering of the Jim Crow laws after the removal of those federal troops. Um, the system, unfortunately, I mean, it's so stacked against us. The justice angle, what is justice? Diversified word. And I like what he said about justice would be that man still will be able to jog and not be considered out of his territory, so to speak. I guess it takes me back to the Trayvon Martin thing when you heard that lunatic say, he's walking around my neighborhood. And the cop said the same thing. We don't need you to follow him. I mean, what is he doing wrong? And he whispers behind his under his breath, the Zimmerman guy, they always get away. So we're stereotyped. We're just justice. What does that mean to us? I don't even think it exists for African Americans here or any minority. I just don't think it exists, because the laws can be appropriated in their, for them in terms of whatever it is that they need to get it to sway or swing, the pendulum their way. I'm an individual who was shot by a cop. I did get a settlement out of it, whatever, but when I got shot by the cop in my own neighborhood in Philadelphia, I thought it was par for the course, right? Because I was out there doing my thing, hustling, doing what I needed to do, but I was doing nothing wrong at that time. And when it all came out, this is a cop who was paid to protect and serve, just came out and assumed something had happened to somebody, that somebody in my neighborhood did something to him. And he just came in the neighborhood to get revenge on a guy and discharged his firearm and shot me. Get over there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, since I'm out in the street, that's something that I took. I wasn't even going to push it to no level. And my lawyer had to tell me, hey, man, you no matter what you're doing out here, he can't do that. But growing up inside the inner city, you always look at them as us against them, right? So where's the justice in that? When cops roll up on us, first thing we do is assume, even in our own being, we could be the most great John Q. public citizen. But as African Americans, when we confronted by law enforcement, and I'm sure some of the gentlemen on the channel now can see, we have a certain sense of fear. We don't seem protected. We like, okay, what are they going to do, or what potentially could they do to, infringe upon my civil liberties, right? I don't look at them as individuals that can protect me, right? And maybe they do for the most part. But the fact that that just exists takes away, in my opinion, any, sensible or feasible concept of what justice ever is going to be for us minorities here. And we talk about the 21st century, where right now this conservative element is rearing its ugly head, almost like as if the Confederacy is making a blatant attempt to show this is who we are, this is what we want to be. We're not hiding no more. It's us against y'all, and y'all need to fear us.
Yeah, the South will rise again is their moniker, and I think that that's been a thing for 200 years or almost 200 years, 100 plus years, and they just they're gonna keep on trying to ride that ghost. Yeah, man, good words, and yeah, absolutely. That they attempt to make us feel this small when there's an encounter that can become contentious, and there's never any concession for the reality of the emotion that can be triggered. The reaction being, I'm a man, just like you are. your authority should not give you the right to treat me otherwise. We're actually supposed to be in this together, and you're here to serve and protect. But it does. I don't feel protected at that moment. That's a real thing, and it's palpable. If you are a black man and you outside, yeah, if you get ran up on, it's a palpable experience. It's not a welcome one. You have something else you want to add, Arthur?
No, I was just saying, from being up north, living there and doing the things, that I've done in my life, being inside those penitentiary walls, if you see the mistreatment of men inside those walls, man, I'm still an individual. I reclaimed myself, got a couple degrees out of universities. I do work that I do now. I work in schools. I've been giving back. I'm a serial, benefactor. I just give everything I can give, man. But if you knew what was going on inside those penitentiaries where those country boys or whoever in those mountains, they just dig holes in mountains and drop them, right? All through Pennsylvania, all through New York. I actually used to go through Rikers Island and help guys out when I was working for the Cure Violence programs there. But to see the misappropriation of the authority there, I don't know if you remember or not, but in 2002 or 3, they convicted a judge in Philadelphia for selling us in the 80s to these youth detention centers. And I was one of those kids. So the broad nature of these type things that are going on, that's continuing to go on. I'm sort of at a crossroad. Like, what do we do? How can we salvage anything to try to bring and brighten the light on that? We had a black president for 8 years, right? And I'm sitting there trying to look and break down what kind of changes was made in terms of the criminal justice reform or whatever system that could actually focus on the mistreatment and things like that of individuals, unfortunately, inside the system. Do everybody belong in the system? Okay, some people do wrong things, and we understand it's necessary. But there's a plethora of individuals and situations that should be looked at, but I just don't think we have the power to do it, and it's unfortunate.
Absolutely, and we'll talk off air about my feelings about our first president of color. I'm gonna come to you, Meryl, to kind of wrap this up, put a bow on it. But I want to say greatly appreciate your presence, Arthur. I hope you don't hesitate to join us again. And I'm going to ask you to make it a point that when I do, and it may be next week, maybe the week after, I want to do a show that unpacks PTSD, black young men in the community. We didn't have time to go into it, but there's a clip of Ahmaud Arbery dealing with some police officers one day when he's just sitting in his car and the police officer tries to tase him. I'll show that clip when I do that show. But you have to make room and concessions for the fact that this guy was dealing with situations that could culminate and allow for him to just be fed up. And that should be allowed for. But that still wasn't the case the day he was murdered. Still wasn't that. But I'm going to let Meryl take us on up out of here. Arthur, greatly appreciate you. Bob, greatly appreciate you. But Meryl, what are your thoughts on the last bit of the topic? Does justice afford us protection? Arthur, if you don't mind, let me get to the YouTube mic. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what everybody's had to share. I think quite simply though, justice is a concept, based on ethics and morality and the idea of impartiality. And because all those things have humans attached to decision making in that space, I don't think it exists. So we're flawed. We have free will. And you hope that you get justice, but because it means so many things, different things to different people, and because of the failings of human frailty, I don't think it does. I have particular thoughts about Rittenhouse that probably aren't popular, as far as like the outcomes and some of that space. So, but it's it's too dependent and too individual, and nothing. A concept can't be guaranteed.
Well said. I appreciate you keeping that pretty compact, and I think it is that much of a thought. You hit on the main problem with justice. It isn't blind. and it's fallible because humans have the ability to sway it one way or the other. I think that's a good place to end. Arthur, I want you back for the PTSD conversation. I think you'll be a wealth of knowledge for that. Bob, always a pleasure. Great to see you, and glad you could make it this evening. Merrill, of course. Thank you guys for being here and showing up, and thank you to those people that commented earlier offline. And y'all have a wonderful Thursday evening. Happy Thanksgiving on the other side, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year on the way. So happy holidays.
And go Saints.
Ah.